y'all, and welcome to the Healthy by Heather Brown podcast, where I encourage you in healthy mind, body, and spirit through my Sunday reset. Let's get into it. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Healthy by Heather Brown. Y'all are in for a treat today because I am bringing not only Dr. John Palmer, who I've had on the podcast multiple times in the past, and I'll link to all his previous episodes, but I'm going to start with a little story, and then I'll get to tell you more about our other guests today because I'm just telling y'all, get your nerd out glasses on. Today's going to be so much fun. Today, Dr. John and I were talking in his office, and I said, hey, this is probably a dumb question, but do you know who Morley is with the root cause protocol? And he said, yeah, I'm certified in the root cause protocol. Of course I know who he is. And I said, oh gosh, I assumed so, but I just had to check in. I said, I'm interviewing him today. And Dr. John said, no way. And I was like, wait, do you want to join? And then lo and behold, here we are, y'all. I get to introduce Morley Robbins to you guys from the Root Cause Protocol and Dr. John Palmer. So welcome, guys.
What's especially fun is I don't often get a chance to chat with graduates of the program. And it's just it's a hoot to have him here and be a part of the tit for tat and see what we can explore.
Well, I've always enjoyed hearing you speak and talk, and just in my functional medicine practice, I feel like when I was missing a piece, and then when I learned what I learned in your certification, it filled that piece, and I felt much more complete as a practitioner. So thanks.
That's great. I'm glad you got a lot out of it. That's wonderful.
That's huge. Well, I'm going to try not to talk over you guys. I want you guys to do most of the talking. But I have to tell you, Morley, how I found out about you in the beginning was I'm in the middle of one of Dr. John's 90-day protocols. And I was at a Bible study with a group of women. And we both were looking for, the gluten-free and the dairy-free items that we could have during Bible study. And I was like, what's your deal? Why are you doing gluten-free, dairy-free? And she said, oh, I'm doing something called the Root Cause Protocol. And I said, oh, tell me more about that. And as she kept talking, I was like, hang on, this sounds very similar to what I'm doing, but I had not heard your name before and I did not know it was called the Root Cause Protocol that Dr. John had introduced me to. So then I got to Googling and then I about fell out when you guys said that you could come on the show. So truly, I'm honored to have both of you guys today.
That's great. And all we did, or at least in the beginning, was we dusted off Mother Nature. This is basic foundational nutrition that's been lost to the ages. And it's a lot of fun to be able to share this information with people because it's very straightforward.
Absolutely. So why don't you kind of start with the basics? We were joking before we hit record that it takes you about 5 hours to tell somebody what the root cause protocol is. But then it actually, you said, takes 5 months to train doctors what the root cause protocol is, which is hysterical. So first of all, if you had to encapsulate it, maybe I should even turn it on Dr. John and ask him to tell it, and then you can grade him. But would you just tell us a little bit about the root cause protocol for someone that's never heard of it before?
What we're really trying to do is optimize energy production inside the body. Because if you've ever been on a boogie board, the things that rock back and forth, if you're on one end or the other, it takes no energy to do that. But to be in the balance takes a lot of energy. And that's what our body runs on, is energy to stay in balance. And the phrase that we use within the RCP is ignore the enemies, the pathogens, the toxins, the heavy metals, ignite the energy, because once the immune system has energy, it knows exactly what to do with it. So that's kind of in a nutshell the way we approach it, but it'd be fun to hear Dr. John in terms of what his approach is for sharing this with his clients and patients in his practice.
Morley, your wife is a chiropractor, correct?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
I was telling Heather today, I was listening to I think it was the intro to your book, or
might have been the end of the book.
No, it's not necessarily when I learned that. It was more so the verbiage and just how you were talking about the human body and how you approach it was kind of like, I don't really have a word for it. It's almost like the ecosystem of like natural healthcare. You were talking within that healthcare system, or that philosophy of that angle of how you talk about the human body. Right. And there's not many people that speak like that are not chiropractors. And I was like, before I knew what you did, I was like, he's a chiropractor, or someone has had a really strong influence on him. So I thought that was pretty amazing, is that just by like, you were speaking about vitalism and you're coming at the body from a holistic point of view, and the way you were talking about disease, And I think you even used the word dis-ease, which is also in that realm.
What really caught my ear was when Dr. Liz talked about the innate healer in our very first conversation. I'd never heard the phrase before. I think that's what you're referring to. It was riveting. And I wanted to learn about that because I couldn't understand if there's an internal process, why do we need doctors? And that's really what sparked my research quest over the last 15 years.
That's awesome. Well, always on a regular basis, I always tell people that the human body is way smarter than me and doctors and period. And it knows what to do better than I do or anyone that could give us information. And just like you said, you really use science to figure out those things, remove certain things from the environment. The body already knows what to do. So that's why I loved the book. Your coaches do a great job. I always enjoyed hearing you talk more, but I greatly appreciate what you're doing for education, just people being empowered to just learn about the human body the way that needs to be taught.
Exactly. Yeah, I think what's really driving the whole movement, if you will, is the democratization of healing. Our ancestors did not have an ologist for every part of their body.
Yep.
Preach.
They had real food. They had a stressful lifestyle, but they did have the benefit of real food, and they had balance in their life. We don't have that, but this is a chance to get people empower themselves to realize that they do have this ability. They just didn't know what the building parts were.
Yeah, I always tell my patients that we live in very segregated lives. Our lives are so compartmentalized. It takes energy to essentially connect the dots. So if someone is dealing with health issues, it takes even more energy, and you have to relinquish a lot of things just to even focus on your health. So you were saying, how would I explain it to my clients? Just as you did, there is an innate intelligence that runs your body, and you got to allow it to do, really, you got to put it in the right environment. And so that environment is the way that I talk about it. I run a natural health center that we do functional medicine, but we do chiropractic and we do fitness and movement. We teach people to move again, rehab things. So it's truly a natural health center. So I always tell people we have to get your body back into a state of ease, state of function. In the angle and talking about the functional medicine portion or root cause protocol, your relationship with iron is massive because it affects mineral metabolism, fat metabolism. It supports immune function, red blood cell function, oxygen, carbon dioxide. It affects all of those. And a lot of people come in and they're looking at the body from a very symptomatic point of view.
Right.
And if you start from looking at it from a getting your iron levels back into check and regulating iron as we know it to reproduce red blood cell the way that we were meant to reproduce it, work on fat metabolism, everything else begins to fall into place. I haven't had as much practice in the sense of like talking about it in that sense, but just educating from where the client is and then just taking steps towards their unique story, but having a foundation to move them forward in their healthcare journey.
Very well said. And I think the key is when I started this work, Heather, I was totally Newtonian. There's a missing mineral, there's a missing vitamin. We got to do something about that. It was all physical. And now 15 years later, I'm totally quantum. And everything begins with an emotional event. And it can just be stress of life in general, or it can be some very specific. And I think people need to understand the power of these unresolved emotions that left unchecked, left festering in their psyche, wreak havoc in our metabolism. And I think people need to really understand the power that these emotions have. And that's why we put such emphasis on releasing, traumatic experiences we've had wherever possible. Because it just, again, we spell the word fear a little differently, Fe-AR. That way you see the symbol for iron that Dr. John's talking about. And then what you learn is that the word fear becomes iron attracts rust. And that really helps people understand so that when I'm emotionally worked up, go into a state of fear, you become a magnet for iron and you don't realize it. But what Dr. John's referring to is there's hormonal pathways that get activated. Cortisol and adrenaline in particular are going to ramp up iron. They were designed to do that because we were running from lions and tigers in the beginning. Well, now we're running from paper tigers, and they just won't go away. And so we go from acute stress of our ancient ancestors to chronic stress of our modern existence, and we can't turn it off. And I think beyond the amazing philosophy of chiropractic and just the whole idea of intention and so many other aspects of it, to me, the most important part about chiropractic, Dr. John, take this in the right spirit, just getting the person to lie down horizontal. Take them out of sympathetic state, which is standing, make them parasympathetic, and they just start to calm down. And it's just, people don't realize the power of that parasympathetic pose of just lying down, not trying to go to sleep, just relaxing, waiting for the golden touch of the chiropractor's adjustment.
Did you know that BJ Palmer, he would, after an adjustment, he would make his people that got adjusted rest for hours after his adjustment?
I did know that. Absolutely.
Wow. This is definitely a little bit of a jump from what y'all were talking about, but I do want to bring this home for the readers or listeners, excuse me. When you guys were talking about iron. Yeah, iron. He was like, where are you guys from? Once I said y'all. I was like, I know.
It's ironer. It's not even iron ore. It's ironer.
Ironer, yeah.
Oh, bless. But you guys were talking about so many things that I think people are gonna be like, whoa, this is a lot just to intake. But I saw, this is the first thing I saw on your Instagram account that kind of got me thinking, is you address why anemia is actually a made up disease and what the connection is to copper. So we've kind of started talking a little bit about iron. And a lot of times, women think, okay, I'm iron deficient. I think my doctor told me that I have anemia. Do you guys mind troubleshooting that a little bit? And I'll tell you from a personal standpoint, Dr. John looked at my blood panel and he said, you're not anemic. You're not, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. John.
I said iron dysfunctional.
You're iron dysfunctional. Right. Your body doesn't know how to uptake and use the iron properly. So will you talk about how women can unlearn the anemia turn and how do you attack it if it's a problem?
Well, the key is, just as Dr. John was pointing out, there's a difference between iron deficiency and iron dysfunction. And the part that most people don't know, especially the practitioners, is that there's an iron recycling program. So we've been chatting now for about 20 minutes. So every second of every day, we need to make 2.5 million new red blood cells. But before we make them, we got to break them down. So the spleen is breaking them down at 2.5 million a second, and the bone marrow is making them at 2.5 million. It's a blistering pace. It's 200 billion red blood cells in 24 hours. That's a surprise to learn, but here's what will shock you. It takes 25 milligrams of iron to support the production of 200 billion red blood cells. So to put it into context, there's 100 milligrams of copper in our body, and that fits on the head of a 1-inch stick pin. So it's a little tiny bit of copper. So let's cut that in quarters. 25 milligrams of iron will support a whole day's reproduction of red blood cells. And how much iron is in our body? About 5,000 milligrams of iron. So we have this 100 milligrams of copper, which is, I call it the general, and so do the traditional Chinese doctors. Copper is the general, and iron is the foot soldier. Well, by law, here in the States, there's 242 generals in the U.S. Army, and there's 440,000 foot soldiers. So just so we drive home that point that it doesn't take a lot of generals to run the show.
Wow.
And it doesn't take a lot of copper to run the iron, but no one's ever heard that. And so let's go back to the 25 milligrams of iron. We're gonna make 200 billion red blood cells in 24 hours. 24 of those 25 milligrams of iron come from a recycling system run by General Copper. And it's like the idea that we need to be taking 45 milligrams, 70 milligrams of iron every day is absolutely false. And the most important point, and I'm sure that Dr. John will comment on this in a minute, is there's a huge difference between low iron markers on a blood test, hemoglobin or ferritin or serum iron or whatever, but low iron markers on a blood test versus high iron in the tissue that never gets measured in a blood test. Was a famous physiologist, Bruce Ames at Berkeley, UC Berkeley, figured this out 20 years ago, that there's 10 times more iron in the tissue than shows up in the blood. And all of the decisions are based on blood work, and no one is looking at the tissue. And we have a blood panel that we use within the root cause protocol that begins to give us insight. It's not perfect vision, but it gives us insight about where the disruption is or the dysfunction that Dr. John is talking about. But that's the key, is realizing that there's this recycling program that no one ever talks about, and there's a difference between low iron in the blood test and high iron in the tissue. And that's the most important distinction for people to learn.
Hey, Mama, do you feel like you are surviving on chicken nuggets and goldfish and haven't stepped in a gym since college? Or maybe, on the other hand, you feel like you're checking every health box and are still hitting a brick wall? Well, I'm here to help you redefine what it means to be healthy from the inside out. I'm a former fitness instructor and everyday mom who is passionate about helping you create a beautiful life you freaking love. So I'm opening the doors to the Healthy by Heather Brown membership to the public and can't wait to walk alongside you and be your cheerleader. When you join, you'll be added to my exclusive Facebook group. You'll receive my Sunday Reset training that will help you create promising, sustainable, healthy choices from the inside out, which will in turn lead to a more joy-filled life for busy moms. Live coaching and workout classes with yours truly. You asked and I listened. We'll talk about how to balance your whole health when you have kids and life get busy with school and activities. It includes grocery haul ideas and accountability as we all reset together each Sunday. There will be so much offered that you won't find anywhere else on the internet. Are you ready to take one step out of stress, shame, unhealthy boundaries, and fatigue and add healthy rhythms to the Hot Mess Express? When you're ready, I'll see you on the other side of the link in the show notes. I'm excited and ready to hold your hand and meet face to face.
I think one group that is a big population that Heather speaks to on a regular basis are, well, female population, but mamas. Like mamas are a big group of her people that listen to her. And it's honestly my favorite group of people to take care of. Could you explain just briefly, and this may be biting off more. And if Heather, if you're like, hey, that doesn't make sense. Could you explain why iron is used up quicker in pregnant mamas in first trimester, second or third trimester, and then essentially what you need to do to support those pathways, not necessarily like in real time, but what do they need to do maybe before they conceive that would support those iron levels? Because if a mama gets to, and I don't know how much of your population is at home births, Heather.
Not huge, I don't think. A small margin.
Yeah, well, at home births, which is kind of a bigger trend that's happening in Alabama, is if your hemoglobin is below 13, no, I'm sorry, it's either 10 or 13.
Probably 20.
Okay, they won't let you have a home birth.
Right.
And so,
wow.
And so it's not necessarily that they need iron, it's that they need other minerals. Can you expound on that? That would be more simply put than I believe I could put. I would complicate it.
No, I appreciate you bringing it up. It's a really critical issue. What's important for people to understand, the process of pregnancy is turning a parasite into a mammal. And I mean that very sincerely. It's an amazing biological transformation that takes place. But the oxygen content of the womb is like the baby or the fetus is at the top of Mount Everest. And so the my two favorite quotes around minerals and pregnancy. One is by Mildred Seelig, world-renowned magnesium expert, and she was a physician, and she said, pregnancy is a magnesium deficient state from stem to stern, from beginning to end. And there's a lot of stress, as you well know, in producing a baby. Well, you're burning up magnesium at a prodigious rate because of that. My other favorite quotation is by a world-renowned alpine physiologist. His name was Sir Joseph Barcroft. He worked at a little university overseas called Cambridge. What did he know, right? But he, later in his career, he switched from mountain climbing to pregnancy. And his famous saying was, pregnancy is Mount Everest in utero. And so the baby is being raised in what's called a hypoxic environment. There's no oxygen down. So you actually don't need a lot of iron in that situation. That's what Dr. John is alluding to, is that there's this change as the fetus evolves, the needs for the minerals clearly change. The key is in the first trimester, a lot of events are taking place, but the energy that's being produced is for the most part anaerobic. Well, that means you've got to have a lot of magnesium because there's 10 enzymes to support anaerobic metabolism, and 8 of them require magnesium. Well, that's a good thing to know. What I find fascinating is doctors or birthing practitioners in general never measure magnesium, never measure copper, and never measure vitamin A. Well, where's the focus? It's on iron, and vitamin D, right? And it's like, it doesn't take a lot of effort to look up what are the nutrients for fetal development: magnesium, copper, and retinol. Very, very important. So then what happens let's progress into the third trimester, because that's where the excitement really begins to build. There's more oxygen, but it's only about 8%. It never reaches the 21% that we are experiencing right now, being on the outside the womb. But what really starts in a very big way is a download of copper from the mother's liver through the placenta to the fetus's liver. And where we as adults, we have 100 milligrams of copper for doing our job, if we're healthy. 100 milligrams of copper. Again, it's tiny, but that's how much we have in our body. When we're born, assuming we're born to healthy moms, and that's a big assumption today, but assuming we're born to healthy moms, we get 70 milligrams of copper from our mother. So 70% of the copper we need as an adult, we're getting from our mom. And I think what's happening, the crisis that's taking place on the planet, all over the planet, is women don't have the copper, and they are producing copper-deficient children. And we can go into that maybe in subsequent conversations. But that's a big problem. But what's also happening is the deliveries are getting compromised. And if the mom doesn't have the ability to make energy during the course of the delivery, you're going to get things like preeclampsia. And so the cornerstones of preeclampsia, the high blood pressure, the high blood sugar, the bloating or the edema that would accompany that.
You also get like a high induced rate too, right?
High induced rate, absolutely. High protein in the urine. All 4 of those components are clinical signs of copper deficiency. And here's one that'll really, really surprise people. Dr. John is talking about a threshold of, I think it's probably around 12 for hemoglobin. And that means that they're completely unaware of the research that's been done by Dr. Steers from the UK. He's a world-renowned OBGYN. Philip K. Steers, I think is his middle initial, Philip K. Steers, 1995. He did a study with 150,000 live births. I would have been impressed if he had 1,500, but he had 150,000. And what he wanted to do was he wanted to look at the hemoglobin of the mom upon delivery and compare it to the weight of the baby and the APGAR score. How healthy is the baby? And what he was surprised to learn, and what should stun everyone in the birthing community, is that the healthiest babies were born to moms who had hemoglobin between 8.5 and 9.5, or 85 and 95, depending upon how you're doing your markers. But the thing is, the threshold of 12 is completely arbitrary, and the argument that's made by OBs and doulas and midwives and what have you is we don't want the mother to bleed out, right? I'm sure you've heard that. All right, now you're sitting down. Okay, Heather, you need to put your seatbelt on, okay?
Ready.
Okay. You've probably heard of a hormone called oxytocin, and it's called pertussin in the delivery suite, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Oxytocin is 9 amino acids long. It's the very first neuropeptide that was isolated, replicated, artificially created, and artificially activated. This is really big stuff. We're going back into the 1950s. The guy who figured this out, Vincent Duvigneau, he got a Nobel Prize a year after he did this, which is unheard of. It usually takes 20 to 30 years to get a Nobel. He got it like that within 12 months of doing his work. And that means it's really big and really important. And oxytocin isn't just the love hormone. It's that bonding hormone. It has a really critical job in the pregnant mother's body, especially after she's just delivered. It causes contraction, and it shuts down the bleeding in the womb, like that. That's the power of natural hormones. Now here's the catch. Hormone gets produced in an unactivated state. In order to activate it, you got to have copper. And so it's like a little light switch on every hormone that gets made. But now don't worry, there are only 4,699 hormones in our body, and they all work the same way with a little light switch. And there's only one enzyme called the PAM enzyme. Nobody's ever heard of it. But the PAM enzyme is activated by copper, and it activates all of these peptides, especially the one that stops the bleeding upon the birth. And it's like, this isn't taught, except only in the RCP Institute. But the thing is, this idea that we have to bulk up hemoglobin so I don't bleed, I've been looking for 3 years for any kind of research that even remotely touches on that. And I've gotten a big goose egg on that. And the thing is, it just becomes, it's the classic case of a lie told often enough becomes the truth.
Yeah.
And that now it's become this urban legend that, if the mother's hemoglobin is over 12 or 13, even better, she's not going to bleed out. It's like, that's insane. It's absolutely insane. And it's what's really behind that low hemoglobin that Dr. Steers found, 8.5 to 9.5. The most important thing for the mom to do after she produces the baby is feed the baby, right? She's got breast milk, right?
Yeah. Skin to skin and breastfeed. Yep.
Skin to skin, breastfeed, right? And guess what iron does to the process of lactation? Shuts it down.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I've got a lactation consultant in the class in group 19, and she's absolutely brilliant. And she and I have been in conversation for about 3-4 years. And finally she said, I think I'm finally ready for you now. So she's been going through all these, case studies, and she said, this stuff is so important for people to understand.
Oh my gosh.
The iron in the pregnant woman's body, the reason why it goes from pre-pregnancy of like a 12.5, maybe it's as high as 13, and during the final stages of the last trimester, it's going down to as low as 8.5, is the iron is being shunted to the baby, just as Dr. John was emphasizing, because the baby's going to need that iron to get the oxygen to be okay when it comes outside the womb. And it's like, the mom doesn't need that iron because she's making milk.
Wow.
And here's the absolute amazing part about it, is that mother's milk has copper, has retinol, has no vitamin D, ding, 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 no vitamin D, and no iron in mother's milk. And then if you go to the store to buy breast milk, it's got 40 times more iron than you're supposed to have. It's got vitamin D, no retinol, no cholesterol, and no copper.
So Heather, retinol being animal form of retinol, that's going to take place also in bone marrow with iron metabolism, building red blood cells. So it is essentially an animal form of retinol, vitamin A. And so the second thing that Morley keeps referring to is a lot of our population takes in synthetic vitamin D, which blocks retinol's essentially metabolism or usage. So whenever we have these high amounts of vitamin D, because one of the things that natural healthcare providers will do, or just people, providers, period, they'll say, oh, you have to have vitamin D. It's responsible for cell division to build a baby. But if you're taking a high amount of synthetic vitamin D, which most of it is, actually 99.9% of it is, and it's going to block retinol, which is going to block mineral metabolism, which is going to block iron metabolism, which is going to block immune system, red blood cell function. So, and the cascade just goes from there. And Morley could talk about it way more intelligently than I could. That's why, like, talking about fat metabolism and fasting and entering ketosis, and that's why, like, using animal fats to build and produce fats for mineral metabolism, iron metabolism in your bone marrow is so important for just life, period, for the human, and iron metabolism. So retinol is vitamin A coming from an animal, like, super important.
Well, that all is incredible to know. And I will say, as a mom who struggled to breastfeed in the beginning with my first, that is incredibly disheartening to hear. Okay, friend, that's a wrap on this week's episode. If you're not already following me on Instagram, make sure to screenshot this episode, share it to your stories, and tag @Healthy by Heather Brown so I can connect with you in my DMs. It truly brings me so much joy to see how these episodes impact you. Make sure to subscribe so we can see you back here next Tuesday for our weekly show. In case you don't know, your downloads, ratings, and reviews are the actual lifeblood of this podcast, and it helps spread the word to your friends and family. So please hit the download button on this episode and leave a 5-star rating if you super loved it. And if we're really BFFs, you'll spread the happy and text this podcast link to someone who needs to hear it today for some encouragement. Scroll down to the show notes on this episode to see any and all links mentioned, freebies to fuel your health goals, prayer-related episodes, and the 7-day free trial of my exclusive membership where I personally coach and cheer you on in whole health. While you're there, make sure to check out my Amazon storefront with healthy snacks, my favorite look for less workout outfits, and books and devotionals that challenge me in my faith. If you ever need to find my Amazon storefront, just Google Healthy by Heather Brown Amazon and it will come up. Have a great day, girl gang.